Hi, this is Raymond Blaha. I'm over here again with another Thinkin' Thursday. I'm the office manager here at our Tampa location, and today's episode of Thinkin' Thursday, we're going to go over a really interesting topic and something that's kind of dear to me with economics, which is ARDL models. And to kind of preface this and really kind of give you an idea as to what we're going to get in today is that as a realtor, you might get a lot of questions, especially given this time during the election season and the transitions of power between the next president and, from the one previous. So one of these questions that as a realtor you might get is, during election seasons, how is the housing market? And in all honesty, that's a great question. And I wanted to dig deeper into this as to figure out, what is the home ownership rate during election seasons back all the way since 1973. And the reason why I went back that far is because, as I mentioned before, with an ARDL model or an auto-regressive distributive lag model, you need time series data. And that time series data is really key to really get you a good idea as to if that hypothesis is true, being if election seasons particularly affect the housing market in that given year. So what I did was I took some data from the consensus.gov, also from the Federal Reserve Economic Data, also known as FRED, and I cleaned the data to figure out, what would be the best time frame in which to really compare all these particular independent and dependent variables to test our hypothesis here. And so I came down with a few independent variables that would be particularly pertinent to this hypothesis. This being, the first one I mentioned, which would be the home ownership rate, and that's what we're going to find out, or the GDP, disposable income, unemployment rate, and finally mortgage rates. And so once you throw that all together, you were able to kind of get into formulating the actual model itself. And one part of formulating that model is to figure out how many distributive lags each indicator that I just mentioned will need to give us the best results to actually test for our hypothesis here. So when I put my information onto eViews, which is a program that will allow you to run time series data and find the ORLs, or the least ordinance linear regressives and stuff like that. And this is the interesting parts of what I was able to find out about this. So as you might see here, there's a lot of numbers in regards to, you'll see your variables, as what I mentioned before, but also the years below it. Now, what's right next to those variables is those coefficients, the standard error, the t-statistics, and the probabilities. It looks like a bunch of jargon. I know, but what really you want to focus on is this particularly, the variables and the coefficients in these matters. So, not to throw another curveball at you yet again, so what do these variables actually mean in relation to those coefficients? So think of it as an inverse relationship, so to speak. If it's positive, if there's a positive coefficient there, it means it's actually going to decrease. And if you see a negative number there, it's actually going to increase. Weirdly enough, I know. But most importantly, when we look at these coefficients and we see that in the long run and like more the mid run home ownership rate, it's increasing. And same with GDP. As GDP increases, the home ownership rate will also increase. Same with disposable income and the unemployment rate. As that decreases, that actually will increase as well. But, what does this actually mean, and is this model actually accurate? So that's why you got to dig a little bit deeper when you're doing ARDL models into F-bound testings and other things of that nature. So I'm going to throw up another thing here up on the screen here for you guys. So the first thing being is the Godfrey bound test. Now this will be able to tell us in regards to our F-bound if this is statistically significant, and also if we can reject our null hypothesis, meaning that those economic indicators do in fact actually affect home ownership rates. And as we can see here up at the top, our F statistics at 1.25. And when we compare that to our probability F, 59, 132, it's at 0.14, which means we do not have serial correlation in regards to our data. Now, that seems like a lot of just jargon, and in a way it kind of is. But to kind of break down that serial correlation for you a little bit more, it means that those numbers are just decreasing or on a particular trend in relationship to each other and giving us a false positive, so to speak. So as we see here, since we do not have serial correlation, we're not getting those false positives in regards to our hypothesis here, and it means that we're on the right track of actually completing our hypothesis. And another really good one is another F-bound test, and in this regards, we're going to take our F statistic, and this is when we first do our ARDL model, and compare that to our lower isotope and our higher isotope. So on the screen here, you'll see an F-bound test of, and we'll see the F statistic at 6, and you'll see also the significance at the I0 and the I1, and the different significant levels that are there. So we see that we got to compare that 6.03 as our F statistic to our lower bounds and our higher bounds, and we see that it actually exceeds it. So we can also again reject our null hypothesis as to this does in fact correlate with each other. Then going back to once we have all this information, as we can actually say that this model is in fact right, or can be accepted in that regard, let's go back and actually see those different coefficients in regards to different years. So you'll see 1976, 1980, 1984, 1988, and on and on and on until 2020. What I found which was most interesting in the years of 1976 and 1980 was the only 2 years that we actually saw a decrease in home ownership rate, whereas the remaining ones we actually see an increase in home ownership rate. And that made me beg the question, is it more in regards to election season, or rather the state of the economy in which was left by the previous administration? And my guess is absolutely the latter, because these particular indicators that we used are a good overall indicator as the health of the economy. And as mentioned before with the beginning coefficients and reviewing them. So a better way to answer this question is not rather how the election season actually affects homeownership rate, but rather the state of economy in which we're in. And getting a little bit more into that, since we are at the lowest interest rates of all time, we are going to see an increase, and we're going to see a continual increase in homeownership rates because it's more affordable. And I went above and beyond as well in regards to trying to decently forecast, or using a forecast graph on that regressed home ownership variable here in that ARDL model, and we see that there was a huge spike in the quarter 1 or quarter 2 of 2020, and the last time it was that high for home ownership rate was actually during the '08 recession, or right before it rather, during the peaks. So if that's any indication as to where we're at in regards to the market, even if we do see a dip of people going into, or maybe extending their timelines a little bit, there's still a lot of people looking. And with the increase in shortages out there right now, with a 1.3 month supply of inventory, home prices are just going to get more expensive. So time is of the essence, especially when we're on a recovery path. Those interest rates are going to go higher, and those purchase prices means it's going to be a little bit more money out of your pocket each month. And if you want to look at the rent versus buy Thinking Thursdays, I believe that was a earlier episode that we did, and featuring yours truly here. So this is kind of wrapping everything up here. So the state of the home ownership market is still strong, and it will continue to grow in strength, especially with those low interest rates. And it's better to look at the overall health of the economy than looking at who is going to be next in a position of power. Thank you for the time that you gave to me today. I hope you learned something today. I sure as learned a lot of information in regards to how these economic indicators work with each other on a long run and short term basis. So thank you for tuning in.